Welcome to Terror in Tandem's Octerrorfest. All month long, we will be celebrating the horrifying delights of the spookiest month, October. Prepare yourself for episodes that frighten and delight in your spine, and we will chill you to the bone. You can find us online at terrorintandem.com and on Instagram at terrorintandem.
Well, I don't know about you, but my chilly spine bone is feeling pretty thrilled.
I hope that that's not your only bone that's thrilled.
Oh, goodness. It's not that kind of pod.
I mean your funny bone.
Oh, ba-doop, boop, 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 my spooky bone.
So this is our final episode of Octerrorfest. The month is coming to a close, and we wanted to record this episode and release it a little bit closer to Halloween. And we'll tell you why in a minute. But I just wanted to say I really enjoyed having this special thematic Octerrorfest with you.
Me too. It's making me look forward to other holidays and, ways that we can spook them up a little bit.
Well, welcome to Chris Terrorfest.
Right.
Christmas Terrorfest.
What's scarier than Christmas? It does have ghost stories, scary ghost stories.
Oh, we're definitely going to do a special Christmas-themed episode.
I have already started working on it.
There's a new one coming out.
There always are. And now that horror is, exploding in the zeitgeist, there are more and more coming out. Are you talking about the one with David Harbour playing like John Wick Santa Claus?
Yeah.
Because I am down for that.
Absolutely.
100%.
I mean, sometimes just going home for the holidays can be a terror. Sometimes. So this final episode of Octerrorfest is Halloween-based and adjacent horror.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, why not close out the month with an episode dedicated to Halloween?
So hopefully you took some of our recommendations on what to stream.
Wait, listener, are you not taking our recommendations?
Well, I'm hoping.
Well,
Hopefully listener isn't listening to this episode in like November. Because you missed it.
You done missed it.
So you can definitely stream some of the recommendations we made in our last bonus-ode. Hope you liked the bonus-ode. Definitely send us a comment.
Yeah, why not?
And let us know if you'd like to hear more bonus-odes.
Yeah. And if you don't, just don't send us any comments. I'm extremely fragile.
So we thought that we would get you really ready for the weekend, Halloween weekend, because Halloween is on a...
It's on a Monday this year.
So
yeah. The
Tuesday?
scariest day of the week.
I think it might be on a...
No, it's a Monday. Yeah.
So what are you going to do this weekend? Well, we'll tell you. We're going to give you some recommendations on what to watch. But first, I would like to tell you all about why we do celebrate Halloween.
I'd love...
As we now know it in America, at least.
The modern version of Halloween.
So Halloween, otherwise known as All Hallows Eve, which comes before All Saints Day, marks the day before the Western Christian feast of All Saints and starts the season of All Hallowtide, which lasts for 3 days and concludes with All Souls Day. So this is way, way back.
Yeah. I grew up Catholic, and I remember November 1st was All Saints Day, and then November 2nd was All Souls Day. And I remember thinking that being kind of like, so on one day we celebrate like the saintly departed, and then the next day is just like everyone else that died. Your shitty uncle.
Yeah. And so in Europe and North America, this was a largely non-religious time of celebration, harvest, the coming of winter.
I'd say particularly in, Ireland and the British Isles. Yeah.
Yeah, the origin comes from the festival of Samhain, celebrated by the Celts of Britain and Ireland. And they believe that the new year began on November 1st, considering it to be the beginning of winter.
It makes logical sense.
Yeah.
The harvest has come and gone. The leaves are past their peak peeping.
Well, the Samhain Festival of Souls, which was celebrated at the end of October, was believed to be the return of souls visiting their original homes.
Yeah, it's
Similar to like a Dias de la Muertos.
Exactly. It's a moment in the year, in the cycle of the year, when the belief back then was that the dead existed sort of in a parallel dimension, which I guess is not dissimilar to like heaven or hell. It's kind of a parallel dimension. And this was the one night of the year that the membrane between the two worlds was at its thinnest. So there was the possibility to visit with ancestors. And it should be said that for the most part, that was not seen as a negative or frightening thing. It was actually looked forward to as a way to commune with your ancestors.
With the quote unquote good souls that passed, there's also the risk of, you know, some of the troubled souls that have passed.
A bummer to think that, like, if you were a total dick in life and you die and become a ghost, you're like still an asshole.
Maybe not. Well, maybe there's.
Do you ever think that there's like someone who was a jerk in life and they become nicer as a ghost?
Sure. Didn't that happen in a movie?
I
don't know.
I feel like I watch the opposite kind of movies where someone was nice and then they die and become a jerk.
Like Scrooge?
Yeah, I guess that plays into the Ghosts of Christmas Past type stuff. The redemption arc.
Well, maybe we'll have to do some research to see if that is something that has happened in maybe novels.
I feel like I have thrown you so far off the rails from what you were
saying. I'm right there.
Oh, that's good. I'm sorry with my tangents.
So the Samhain Festival, bonfires were set on hilltops for lighting their hearth for winter, and also as guideposts to help the souls find their way home,
like beacons,
and to scare away evil.
Oh, neat.
And sometimes people wore masks to disguise themselves to avoid being recognized by ghosts.
Huh. So, like, your nemesis from the village that died last year.
Or that you killed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Or you have since coveted the wife of...
Old Sean O'Herlihy that I pushed into the river a year past.
Sean O'Herlihy.
Yeah.
That was pretty good.
It was, you know, it was something.
When the Romans conquered the Celts, they added their own festival called Feralia, and it honors the dead of Pomona, the goddess of harvest. So that then you can see the transition from souls and the return of souls to really plentiful harvest. And we have talked about folklore and how, you know, the significance of rituals around getting a good crop or good harvest. The ancient
belief that blood needed to be fed into the earth, or that sacrifices needed to be made to the gods or to the spirits of the wood for, you know, a bountiful harvest.
So Absolutely. Prior to the Celts being conquered by the Romans, we had the, you know, marking of All Hallows Eve, having the souls come back. Romans conquer, they have the festival for the harvest.
And this is pre-Christian Roman Empire.
Well, right.
Yeah.
Now we jump all the way. I mean, I feel like that was like the 2nd century or something. Now we jump all the way to the 7th century. And then the Pope officially established All Saints Day.
Yeah.
It was originally in May, but was later moved to November 1st.
I wonder why...
Not to interrupt on Easter.
Why would the Catholic Church invent an entirely new holy day and plop it right after the 1,000-year-old popular day that everyone they just conquered celebrates?
Because they want attendance at church.
Oh, okay. Got it.
For November, too.
Got it.
You know, when it gets cold, people don't want to go out
as much. I'm just saying, the Romans were really, really good at conquering because they would... quote unquote allow the conquered people to maintain some of their culture. You see that when the Romans conquered Greece, and they kept basically the same pantheon of gods. They just gave them kind of different names. It's a way to, I think, more easily forcefully integrate a conquered people.
Yeah.
If you allow them to keep some of their traditions. And that's largely what Samhain became when it was turned into Halloween. The Catholic Church, I think, was smart to realize we can't get rid of this completely because it will cause an uprising. So let's just Christify it a little bit.
Well, there wasn't really a lot of like what we think of as Halloween, or even what the tradition of Samhain did before the Romans sort of took over the All Saints' Day. The evening before All Saints' Day became holy or hallowed, a hallowed eve, which is, got the term Halloween, through time. But by the end of the Middle Ages, the secular and sacred days merged, and the Reformation put an end to the religious holiday among Protestants. And in the UK, Halloween continued to be celebrated as a secular holiday. And then when immigrants came to the U.S. from Ireland and England and other European countries in the 19th century, they took Halloween customs with them. So their original Halloween customs.
Yep.
So now here we are, all these many years later, and
like
a few
so many
centuries later,
wonderful
that we
things in
are
this
still
country.
celebrating Halloween, but in a trick-or-treating, candy costuming sort of way.
Yeah, I mean, it's all, like everything that comes to America, it's been commercialized and, mass produced and all that, but that doesn't mean we still can't enjoy it.
No, I consider Halloween a celebration of, either hiding or becoming.
It's certainly a time to express yourself, to maybe show the world a side of yourself that you keep locked away the other 364 days a year. If you are into the spiritual side of things, it is a nice time to reflect on those that have come and gone, those you've lost. And
there wasn't really that much RPG role-playing games or opportunities for people to like dress up and emerge as like a superhero at like a festival
like
or
a
something like
convention
that.
or something. Yeah.
So Halloween, especially when, in the 60s and 70s when, I was growing up, was really that time of year.
60s?
In the 70s when I was growing up,
okay.
I said.
Yeah.
And maybe it's 30s, maybe it's 80s. No one will ever know.
We are
how
talking
old I am.
the 1660s, of
Correct.
course. Yes, obviously.
But I think it's, really important. I also read something about how it wasn't a pumpkin that was originally carved. It was a turnip.
Huh. Carving turnips. Yeah, every year I remember we'd gather around the old turnip barrel and carve our Halloween turnips.
So what we thought we would do is give you some horror that takes place during Halloween.
Yeah,
whether
get you
it's
in
a
the spirit.
backdrop or it's about, like Halloween. We're obviously going to mention Halloween, but we're going beyond that. So I think you're going to talk a little bit more about lesser known, and I'm going to talk about a little bit more mainstream.
Well, that was awesome. A little bit of history.
Why don't you start with your first
I'm going to.
Halloween horror?
I'm going to. So I've broken this up. I've got 3 movies that I want to talk about. And the 3 movies that I'm going to talk about, Halloween is an integral part of the movie. It's not just something that has happened in the background, or it's not just a movie that takes place during the Halloween season. So I'm going to start off with my favorite of the bunch. Now, this is a movie that, when it was released, was much maligned. People didn't quite know what to make of it. Critics didn't like it. Audiences didn't get it. Or, it wasn't what they were expecting. Over the years, it has garnered a much-deserved cult following and been revisited, and I think been reevaluated. I am, of course, talking about Halloween 3: Season of the Witch, which came out in 1982, was directed by Tommy Lee Wallace, who was a frequent collaborator of John Carpenter.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He was actually one of the creators of the shape mask for Michael Myers.
Yeah.
So here's the thing about Halloween 3. Michael Myers is not in this movie.
No, it's not even about him.
He's not mentioned. There's no slashers. Mm-mm. It's not a slasher film. Laurie Strode's not in it. It has fuck all to do with the previous 2 Halloween movies.
It's based on a book.
Well, there are a couple of things going on. It is based on a book. Now, John Carpenter had originally intended, after the success of the original Halloween, he wanted to make the Halloween franchise an anthology, each movie being a different story. He didn't really get to do that with Halloween 2 because the studio wanted a sequel. So while Tommy Lee Wallace directed Halloween 3, John Carpenter did co-write it. Take Michael Myers out of your head. It's got nothing to do with that at all. It stars the great Tom Atkins, who we all know and love from Night of the Creeps and The Fog, as a doctor who basically the movie starts with the owner of a Halloween store. He's being chased by these mysterious figures. He gets attacked. Tom Atkins is his doctor, and this guy gets murdered. So Tom Atkins becomes suspicious. He's approached in a bar by the daughter of the man who was just murdered, who is quite suspicious about the death of her father. Now, the thing, and Tom Atkins agrees to help her investigate whatever is behind her father's murder. The thing I really love, and this is kind of true to his character from The Fog, his sole motivation in this movie seems to be he just wants to have sex with this woman. And then he legit stumbles upon like a world-ending conspiracy and becomes a hero. I mean, he like fights this great evil, and he really does rise to the occasion, no pun intended. But kind of like how he did in The Fog. But his sole motivator for like joining in this in the first place is he's just horny. That's it. That seems to be Tom Atkins' like MO, is he gets horny and then he gets drawn into like fighting the great evil. So that's kind of a bummer. Anyway, Halloween 3. Have you ever seen it?
Mm-hmm.
So it's
I have.
It's basically it's about this guy played by Dan O'Herlihy, who you might probably recognize as he was the old man from the RoboCop movies. He was the head of the corporation. Just a great, character actor as well. So he is the owner of a company called Silver Shamrock, and he makes these masks. Now, the whole conspiracy is these masks, they've got a special chip in them. When the kids put them on and they watch a special commercial that plays on Halloween night with this special jack-o'-lantern that flashes on the screen and plays a jingle, their heads turn into bugs and snakes. Now... This movie's pretty wild.
It is.
It's
wild is definitely a word for it.
It is a lot of fun. It's very 80s. It's got like androids and robots, and now the head android was actually played by Dick Warlock, who was the actor who played Michael Myers in Halloween 2. But it's so there's no Michael Myers, there's no Laurie Strode, there's no Dr. Loomis. It's Tom Atkins fighting Dan O'Herlihy, who is this creepy, rich owner of a company, and his whole plot is to bring back the real Halloween, right. the real festival of Samhain that was blood sacrifices and, death and destruction and blah, blah, blah. He gives this amazing monologue that is like really classic villain, where he talks about, the old world. So it's got an amazing ending of, Tom Atkins screaming into the telephone at the 3 TV stations. This is 1982, so there are 3 TV stations. You got to take the ad off the air. You got to take the ad off the air, and I won't spoil it, but it's not a happy ending.
No, it's the last Halloween.
Yeah, it's really, really, really great. It's a strange oddity of a film. And if you can just get past the fact that, yes, it's called Halloween, but there is no Michael Myers in it, just get past that. And what I think you'll find is a very strange, effective movie with some really excellent practical effects and some very frightening and horrifying moments. And, this grand plan to murder millions of children with masks that turn them into snakes and bugs is, there's a scene where they show that happening in a test room, and it is genuinely horrific.
Well, the book is written by Jack Martin.
Oh, I've never read it.
Yeah, I did read it before I ever saw the movie. When I was a kid, I read it.
Get out.
Oh,
you
yeah.
did?
Oh, yeah.
I had no idea.
The cover scared me a lot.
Holy crap.
you should look the cover up.
I'm going to read the book.
And on the front of it, it's Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. And it says the night no one comes home.
Yeah. It's got so much cool stuff in it. Like, it's got androids with their like goopy android blood, and they make those 80s robot servo noises whenever they move. Like, it's just like, it's wild.
Awesome. So my first recommendation, which I did recommend on What You Can Stream, but now I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about it, is The Changeling from 1980.
Very, very cool.
Not the one with Angelina Jolie.
No, with George C. Scott.
Unfortunately, I have to keep clarifying that.
I know.
Because it does come up when you Google it.
It does, yeah.
So, yeah, look for the 1980 version. And basically, this is a haunted house movie. It starts with George C. Scott, who moves into the house. He's a composer who's recently widowed, and his child has died in a car accident. He goes all the way to Seattle to move on to like try to compose something new. And he rents this place because there's a large music room, and it has a piano that eventually plays itself when nobody's there. And so he starts to get the heebie-jeebies.
As one would.
Yeah, he doesn't understand like what's going on. He starts to hear things, thinking that he is like hearing a ball bouncing, like a child's ball bouncing.
Pipes, you know?
No, not so much pipes.
Wasn't there that scene where there was like banging pipes?
Maybe in the attic, I think.
Yeah.
So he goes to the local historical society to find out who lived in the house, and he finds out by a woman, or I think it's a woman that works there at the historical society. Nobody's meant to live in the house.
Uh-oh.
Like, nobody's meant to live in the house.
Don't want to hear that.
An old music box in the attic starts to play a song that he had composed earlier that morning. He starts to have like nightmares of a child being drowned, and he then invites in a seance of where a house ghost appears.
Yeah.
At the seance.
Yeah. It's a real classic style movie.
Yeah.
Honestly, you can watch with the whole family.
The seance scene is really amazing because George C. Scott is such a good actor.
Oh, yeah. He was one of the greatest.
Yeah. And, you know, he eventually finds out that there has been a death in the house, maybe many deaths. And it's a very creepy, well acted and visually like mystical
it's
movie.
A well-crafted film.
Yeah,
it does a lot with the philosophy behind this is withholding. This is the kind of movie that frightens you, I think, more with the implication than with actually there. It's not like a jump scare type movie. Right. It's not a gory movie. It's a very chilling, scary movie that gets under your skin.
Yeah.
And George C. Scott is fantastic in
Absolutely.
Everything.
Yeah.
So cool.
So check that out.
Oh my gosh, it's a classic. Love that
It's
movie.
very scary.
Yeah.
I think.
Do you want to take a break?
Sure.
Maybe make some of that cheddar cheese?
Looking to add some excitement to your Halloween party? Want to add some frights to the night? Well, look no further. Hire Brian. Brian can handle all of your wishes for a hauntingly good time for any style of party you might be hosting. Need a scary clown? Hire Brian. Want a secret stalker to scare trick-or-treaters? Brian is your man. Mad scientist? Scarecrow? Masked monster? Brian is up for all of it. Since completing his stint in a disreputable penitentiary, Brian has been fine-tuning his abilities to morph into what you need him to be, living up to his given nickname on the block, the Chameleon of Chaos. Brian is cheap, sometimes coming into your home for free. Brian will come and go as he pleases, sometimes without your knowledge. How easy is that? Depending on what you need Brian to do, he may add some of his own unique flair. Brian has a way of sticking with you, so tell your friends. We are not responsible for any damage, death, or dismemberment that Brian may or may not cause. Just go with it. Hire Brian. If you don't, he may show up anyway. This is a fake ad for a fake product on a horror-themed podcast. We do not condone nor endorse what Brian does that might be immoral or illegal.
All right. So, next one from me. So, my next one is what I'm calling the best movie on my list. And it is May from 2002, directed by...
But this is... I'm sorry to interrupt. We're talking about Halloween...
Please don't. I mean, I already know where this is going.
We're recommending movies about Halloween.
I'm just basically going to cut the whole episode. So anyway, the movie is May. It is directed by Lucky McKay. It came out in 2002. This movie rules, you guys. It has a very early 2000s cast. Angela Bettis, Jeremy Sisto, Anna Faris is in it. I want to know why Angela Bettis isn't a superstar, like an Academy Award-winning actor of that caliber, because she is so good in this movie. It is, I mean, it's mind-blowing. So May is the titular character played by Angela Bettis. She is a girl who had a pretty weird upbringing. Her had an abusive, weird mom who gave her a doll named Susie. When she gave it to her, said, if you can't make a real friend or
That's so
just
mean.
make a friend. Now, as a child, May had a lazy eye that got her a lot of bullying. So she never really learns to socialize. Now, as a young woman, when the movie picks up, she gets her lazy eye corrected. And kind of like she's all that, everyone realizes, oh, you're actually gorgeous. And people start showing interest for the first time. Now, May has kept Susie, the doll, all this time. And Susie is her best friend. She talks to her. They have conversations.
I feel like I had a doll named Susie.
It's possible.
Like Susie cries a lot or something.
So this movie really plays into that wonderful tradition of woman losing her grip on reality. Like Repulsion, like Carrie, or, to a lesser extent, Rosemary's Baby,
right,
where you're following a female character as they deteriorate. And the tragic thing about movies like that is there are always moments throughout the film where you feel like if someone had just stepped in or said something or treated them differently, all of this could have been avoided. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know. That may be true with May. I think it's also equally possible that May was always going to turn out the way she turns out towards the end of the movie. So Angela Bettis just plays this character so wonderfully. She certainly has a menace to her, but there's also an innocence that is irresistible. And you really feel for May as she gets, hurt and mistreated, as she misinterprets people's social signals because she doesn't know how to act, and she embarrasses herself and humiliates herself. So she ends up... Well,
socializing with a doll only isn't going to help with...
Exactly. She really doesn't know how to read situations. And, she ends up going on a date with Jeremy Sisto's character, who's shows her this film he made that is about cannibals, and she gets really, really turned on by it, and she bites him, and it freaks him out. So moments like that where she thinks she's making inroads with people and then gets slammed back to reality of like, you're a real weirdo. So anyway, it all builds to Halloween night, where May decides she is going to build a life-size version of Susie to be her real friend. Basically, she's going to be Dr. Frankenstein. Now, throughout the movie, she has been meeting people like Jeremy Sisto, Anna Faris, other characters, and she's constantly remarking on a specific body part of the person. Like, she always talks about her friend Polly's neck. She talks about Jeremy Sisto's hands.
She's making a doll, isn't she?
Well, she goes out on Halloween night dressed up as Susie the doll. And the creepiest thing she does is she acts normal. She puts on a totally normal personality, acts like a regular person, and just goes on a murder spree, collecting parts. She makes all the stops you would expect her to make. She gets her goods. And the end of the movie is quite shocking. And there is something a little bit beautiful about it as well. Yeah. It's sad. It's poignant. May is undoubtedly a monster who does monstrous things, but she's a sympathetic monster. And like I said before, Angela Bettis is just... There are just certain roles that actors take on where they transcend. And this is one of those roles. May 2002, it's certainly the highest, what I would say is the best quote-unquote movie on this list. It is, I think, considered a modern classic. It's really, really good. I can't recommend it highly enough. May.
Awesome. Even though it's October, everyone.
Okay.
She's 50.
Angela Bettis?
Yeah.
Wow.
So my next recommendation is Pet Sematary.
Oh yeah.
With a mention of Pet Sematary too, because they also take place during, like Halloween, Thanksgiving time frame.
You know what? When you get into that, I've got a little story about Pet Sematary too.
So just a brief overview. It's based on a book written by Stephen King. Although the film does diverge from the book a little bit, not too much, because he also wrote the film.
We're talking the 80s version that Mary Lambert directed.
Yes, I was getting to that. So this film came out in 1989.
We're just so connected.
And yes, directed by Mary Lambert, starring Dale Midkiff, Denise Crosby, and Fred Gwynne, otherwise known as another Halloween favorite, Herman Munster.
And Denise Crosby, my fellow nerds will probably recognize from the first season of Star Trek The Next Generation.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
She was Tasha Yar.
She wore the blue? Red.
No, yellow. And she died in the first season. It was quite controversial.
Spoiler alert.
The show came out in 1989.
I know. I was just going to start watching it, though. So basically...
You should skip the first season. It's bad.
Dale Midkiff plays a doctor, Lewis Creed, and he moves his family to Maine, which that was his first mistake. And then he becomes he meets
all the ghosts live in
his
Maine.
Neighbor local named Judd, and that's played by Fred Gwynne. And they have a cat named Church. Actually, it's Winston Churchill, but they call the cat Church, and they live on this intense stretch of road where these Mack trucks come barreling down the road. And so that's
these big logging trucks.
That's pretty obvious that it's going to play a major role of destruction.
Yeah. It's the
from pretty much the beginning of the movie.
The Chekhov's knife scenario. The first time you see one of those trucks speeding down the road, you're like, oh, that's going to play into it.
Yep. So what happens to Church?
Or Chekhov's gun, excuse me.
Church meets Maximum Overdrive and
another crossover.
Is accidentally killed. And so Judd, because they have this daughter and this young son, Gage, who is played by the most adorable actor. He did
a bunch of stuff. He was in Mercury Rising.
Cute. So adorable. I remember how adorable he was. Before. And then basically the neighbor, Judd, says, I'm going to take you to a place where you can bury the cat.
Yeah.
And they go on this long trek, and it's a pet cemetery, and the cat comes back to life, and it's not the same cat. It's not the same gentle, loving cat.
Sour.
Yes. It basically turns the cat to a zombie, an evil zombie. And so other things happen. I mean, is this a spoiler-free zone or what?
I don't think. I mean,
at
the movie
this point,
is like 40
if you don't
years
know
old,
what
and
this
it's
is
been
about,
remade, and it had a sequel.
Right. So Gage gets hit by a truck.
He sure does.
Really sadly and tragically. It's probably one of the sadder moments of a Stephen King movie.
It's a well-constructed sequence.
It is.
The way it's shot. Yeah.
And so Lewis decides to bury his son in the same, ground.
Yeah, I mean,
despite Crandall being like, you can't do it. You can't do it. Not
listen,
humans. That's not how it works.
Dad has lost his fucking mind at this point.
And so Gage comes back. And then something happens to the wife, which you have to see to believe. And then she also comes back. So it's almost as if this, Lewis is constructing this zombie family because he can't bear to lose anybody.
Well, can we also talk a little bit about the flashbacks with his sister?
Yes.
Zelda, played very memorably by Amanda Plummer.
Yes.
So, yeah, he throughout the movie, he has these flashbacks of his childhood with living with his older sister, who was afflicted with a horrific form of, I believe, spinal meningitis or some sort of horrible scoliosis where she was contorted and
in constant agony,
pain, always screaming. And Amanda Plummer is a very distinct looking actor, and she really with her sharp features and the way she was able to bend in this movie, it's very, very disturbing, and that keeps flashing back throughout the movie. So this guy has issues before he buries.
And she was also mistreated.
Oh yeah. There's all that.
There's like
too.
abuse.
They basically kept her locked away in a room until she died.
Yeah, and he was just a kid during this time, so
carries with him a lot of guilt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and also never could do anything for her. And I think also because he could put up with that she wasn't quite right, that he thought he could put up with his family being a little off. But
it's just,
they're not off.
It's
they
hubris.
Need to feed on things.
Yeah, it goes about as well as
blood
you'd think it would.
Skin. And there's definitely a really rough slice situation happening.
You talking about the Achilles tendon?
Ooh.
Yeah, poor Judd.
So it's just, I think it's a really great, amazing book.
The first movie is amazing. I believe R.L. Stine, the author, cites Pet Sematary, the novel, as his favorite Stephen King book. He says
wow.
It's the scariest book he's ever read.
It is extremely scary.
Yeah, the book's legit
but
terrifying.
It is. But it's also, the book, read right now. The movie, watch this weekend. It's also scary and sad, and just Stephen King makes an appearance.
Of course.
As the priest
at
the cemetery.
Yeah.
At the cemetery.
Yes. Spelled with an S.
Yes.
Because it was built by the children of the town.
Right.
So it has that little bit of whimsy. But it was also built on an ancient indigenous burial ground.
Well, they get into that more in Pet Sematary 2.
Movie. You're right.
That's also directed by Mary Lambert. It's starring Edward Furlong, Anthony Edwards, and Clancy Brown.
And Clancy Brown is so good.
He's so good.
The movie's not great.
No.
But he's
I'm
good.
not recommending this movie. I'm mentioning it.
He is good.
It came out in 1992, and the synopsis is
right after Eddie Furlong was in Terminator 2.
Or right before.
It was like around the same time. So
because he's the same age.
He had a big year.
So Edward Furlong's mother dies, and he moves back to his hometown with his father, played by Anthony Edwards, and he gets friendly with some kids at school who tell him about a Native American burial ground that people bury their dead animals to get them to come back to life, and which led to the deaths of the Creed family. So that's sort of how they bring it in. That's something Stephen King would have done.
Yeah. It's just...
They mention it, he ignores everybody's warnings about not burying a corpse, but he ends up burying a corpse.
I actually ended up seeing Pet Sematary 2 before I saw the first one.
Oh, why?
I don't know. I rented it.
You had read the first book.
I had read the book. I rented it, and I remember I watched it with my younger brother, and I kept asking him, I was like, are you sure you want to watch this? Are you sure? And at a certain point, it became very obvious that he was fine. I was the one who was terrified and hoping he would be like, nah, it's cool. And he still makes fun of me for that today. But yeah, it's a bad movie, but Clancy Brown gives a real memorable turn in it.
If you wanted to do a 1 and a 2, they're They're there for you.
Can we talk about the remake for like 2 seconds?
Okay.
So the remake...
I thought you had a story, though.
That was my story about my brother.
Oh, okay.
I didn't say it was a good story.
No,
so
it was a great story.
The
Everybody
remake,
loves it.
Right? The remake, I'm just going to level with you. Neither of us were fans. We did not like it.
It really... it jumped the shark like 3 minutes into the movie. No.
There are a couple of things in this movie that I found extremely problematic. But I do want to talk about something very funny. Is John Lithgow plays... Judd in this movie. So he plays the Fred Gwynn character. And he does a great job because he's John Lithgow. But he tells this long story about how when he was a kid, his dog died and he buried it in the pet cemetery and it came back wrong. And they eventually had to kill it again because it was like a monster dog. Now he tells, who's the dad? Jason Isaac? No, not Jason Isaac. Jason Clarke. He tells the dad this story. And then after all of that, later on is the one who helps him bury his people in the pet cemetery. And I'm like, hey, neighbor of the year, didn't you do this exact thing like 50 years ago and it was the worst thing that ever happened to you? And now you're just like, well, I don't know. Let's try it with a human.
It's sort of like, what was the point of the warning?
It was amazing. It was like, let me tell you this terrible thing that happened when I did this exact thing we're about to do, only with a human now.
I did like the church cat in the newest one.
And there was a bit of a twist.
And I also like the kids in those masks going to the pet cemetery to bury a pet.
Look, it's made by two very talented filmmakers who are certainly stylish. There were a few elements I don't really want to get into that just I couldn't get over. And ultimately it didn't work for me. No. But I could never get over warning your neighbor about this thing you're doing and then immediately being like, but let's do it anyway.
Stephen King didn't write that screenplay.
He did not, no. So my last one is what I'm calling my unique entry because it's a little different than the others. It's not technically a movie. It is a special TV presentation, a made-for-TV movie that was broadcast on October 31st, so Halloween night, 1992 on BBC One. And of course, I am talking about Ghostwatch. Ghostwatch was a mockumentary released by the BBC. It was it was not the first mockumentary. This is Spinal Tap had come out 12 years before. We've talked about Hexen in a previous episode, and that was from the silent film era. So the idea of a fake documentary was not unique to Ghostwatch. So the story is loosely based on the story of the Enfield poltergeist, which was also the inspiration for The Conjuring 2. So the basic premise of Ghostwatch is there are two anchors in the studio, and there's an investigative journalist on the site at this haunted house in the greater London, in a suburb of Greater London. So the investigator is they're cutting back to the studio where they're taking calls from the public. They're cutting back to the reporter who's on site. And it's this poltergeist that is terrorizing this poor family named Mr. Pipes. So it keeps cutting back between the live footage, and then back to you. And the whole thing is filmed like an actual live special broadcast. And they advertised it that way. And people thought it was real. And another reason people thought it was real is because it was starring real BBC broadcasters. I mean, the lead anchor of this film was played by Michael Parkinson, who was an actual BBC broadcaster. So people who tuned into this. Now, right before they aired it, the BBC made the production put a written by credit in the front. They thought that would be enough. It was not enough. So essentially, the reporter who's on site discovers a reason to believe that this is all bullshit, that it's made up. So they're starting to okay, great, I guess this didn't work out. And then things start to really go wrong. And it picks up rather quickly. Mr. Pipes makes his presence known. And then something really creepy happens is Mr. Pipes leaves the home and enters the studio where the anchors are.
Meta.
So the audience runs and screams. Michael Parkinson gets possessed. Shit goes wild, and the broadcast cuts out. And people went fucking...
Is that how it ends?
Yes. People went bananas. It ends with the dark studio. The audience has fled. All these papers and things have been kicked up, and Michael Parkinson is just sort of wandering around, and it's become quite obvious that he is not himself anymore.
Wow. So it's a mockumentary.
It is a mockumentary. Now, it has a bit of a complicated legacy, kind of like when Orson Welles did his radio version of War of the Worlds and people thought it was real. A lot of people thought this was real.
You said that.
It was blamed in court for the suicide of a young man a few days later who was convinced that his house was haunted by a poltergeist.
That's sad.
There were several children that sued the production, claiming to have post-traumatic stress disorder from watching it.
And so you are recommending
I am
watch
absolutely
this?
recommending this.
Okay.
Because it's from 1992, and we all
It's not
know
real.
it's fake. It's not real. If you watch it...
No horror
honestly,
movie is real.
Listen, if you're watching it and you thought it was real at the time, I kind of think that's on you. At no point in this movie was I thinking like, oh, this could be plausible or happening. But it's a lot of fun. It's done really, really well, and they really stick to the premise that this is actually happening. This is a real broadcast. So it's not shot like a movie. It's shot like an investigative journalist report, like a special live report.
Got it.
It's so cool. It's definitely dated. I mean, it's 1992, so the outfits are something. But I think if you are in for something different, if you're in for something you can enjoy with the whole family, it's not gory. It was made for television broadcast, for the mainstream. It's still quite scary and effective. It's a really good ghost movie. And I just am so tickled by the fact that it freaked people out. I do hope that it didn't cause the serious problems that some people claimed it did. And I don't mean to make light of anyone's struggles, but it does remind me of when the Blair Witch came out and half of my friends thought it was real.
I thought it was real.
Yeah. So I remember...
I went to it without reading anything about it.
Well, I very purposefully saw that in the theaters and did not tell my friends anything about it. I just let them go with what they thought. And
well, bully for you.
So yeah, Ghost Watch. It's I believe it's on Shudder. Check it
Wow.
out. It's really worth a watch.
Wow. Shudder
It's
has a lot.
It's a lot of fun.
Or Tubi.
Love
So
Tubi.
my last one is Trick or Treat
Oh,
from 2007.
love it.
It is a horror comedy.
And an anthology.
And yeah, right. It's directed by Michael Dougherty. He actually wrote it as well, starring Anna Paquin, Brian Cox. Yes, Brian Cox from Succession and other things, many things.
Like every other thing.
And Dylan Baker, who is always creepy. He always plays some sort of like creepy, like priest or
Like suburban dad with a dungeon.
yes.
Yeah. He's those. He was. He never actually turned into the character, but he played Dr. Kurt Connors in the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies.
Yeah.
Which, if they had kept going with those, he would have eventually become the Lizard.
Mm-hmm. Right. So basically, it's about the residents of a small Ohio town. There are 4 different stories, and they're all like intertwined and woven together. One is about a high school principal serial killer. Another one is about a college version looking for a boyfriend.
And that high school principal serial killer has a really good ending.
Oh yeah, it's great.
It's satisfying.
The third is about a woman who hates Halloween and like dressing up in costumes, and a husband who's obsessed with it. And then a group of young teens who pull a pretty mean prank.
Yeah.
So
also very satisfying. In the end.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It had a pretty small release, but since has a super cult following, mostly because Trick or Treat Sam
Yep.
The kid with the burlap sack mask and the orange pajamas.
He's become a bit of an icon over the years.
Absolutely. And that costume is super popular with kids for Halloween. And I saved it for last because it is the most Halloween of the Halloween horror recommendations I have.
Every scene in this movie is dripping
with
Halloween.
All of the four stories all take place on Halloween and about Halloween, and have this. I think it's exactly what I envision when people want to be scared on Halloween. This is what to watch.
I agree. This is if there's one movie to recommend to people as a quote unquote Halloween movie, I will always go to Trick or Treat. It's got everything. It's a lot of fun. It's bloody. It's thrilling. It's sexy. But like, it doesn't go to excess in any one of those areas. So it's still, I think, enjoyable by most people. It's not too hardcore.
Yeah.
But it's not a kids movie.
No, it's funny and scary and weird and Halloween horror. I mean, it perfectly encapsulates the episode theme, and it's a great way to end the
Anna
episode.
Paquin's great in it too.
Yes, absolutely.
I want to throw out a couple of
make it quick.
Yeah, these are just quick mentions. These are movies where Halloween is taking place sort of in the background, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's a central conceit to the film. So, The Exorcist takes place during the Halloween season.
Did you want to do rapid fire?
Rapid fire, yeah.
All right.
I've got The Exorcist.
I got Poltergeist.
Sinister.
I got The Scare House.
Donnie Darko.
Halloween.
Not my favorite movie, not my favorite director, but House of a Thousand Corpses. And obviously, the one to top them all off, Ernest Scared Stupid. The fifth Ernest P. Worrell movie starring Eartha Kitt. Movie. It is a horror movie. He unwittingly unleashes trolls that turn children into blocks of wood, I think. My dad took me to see it in the theater. Thank you, Dad. I put you through a lot. You really suffered for me. And it's terrible. Know what I mean?
I do. I would also say,
respect to the late great Jim Varney. I loved Ernest. I loved him. He was great. But yeah, Ernest Scared Stupid it's a good gateway horror. Honestly, it's got like enough practical effects to be kind of gross.
I would also say that if you want to go to theaters or you want to watch a brand new movie, Spirit Halloween. I don't know anything about it. I'm not recommending it. I'm just saying it out loud.
Oh, the Spirit Halloween movie. Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, just came out.
Yeah.
So check it out. Well, anyway, wonderful Halloween.
Happy Halloween, everybody.
Thank you for joining us for our entirety of Octerrorfest.
It's been a blast.
We will be with you same time of our typical pod day with our regular programming with what we're looking forward to in November.
I definitely don't think that could have been said any better. Bye, everybody.
Terror in Tandem is written, produced, and recorded by Laura and Richard Mathiasen, and edited and mixed by Richard Mathiasen. Our Octerrorfest theme and all other music was written and performed by David Suspanic. All opinions expressed on this podcast are our own and should be taken as such. Thanks for listening, and please remember to give us a like, a review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you do, we promise not to haunt you.